All right, our participant count is going up. This is great. Everybody's popping in here with us. I'll give them just a minute to file in here. Awesome. All righty, let's get started. Welcome everyone to the Texas Association for College Admission Counseling Virtual College Fair. We're so excited to have you participating in this event. We have some fantastic schools represented here with us today. My name is Chelsea and I will be the facilitator. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. Your camera and microphone are off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you, but you can use the Q&A button on your screen to type your questions to the presenters at any time. This is one of many sessions happening, so be sure to check the schedule on the website. This presentation is being recorded and will be available at strivescan.com/Texas. And I'd now like to turn it over to all of our presenters, but first we're going to start with Abby.
Hi, everyone. My name is Abby Pfister-Soria. I am one of the Associate Directors of Undergraduate Admissions at SMU in Dallas, and I will be the moderator for today's session. Byron, you want to go ahead and introduce?
Hi, my name is Dr. Byron Kerr. I'm the Assistant Director for Financial Aid and Scholarships at Texas State University.
Hi, I'm Penny Griffin. I'm the Assistant Director of Financial Aid here at Southern Methodist University.
Well, thank you all for coming today. We know that this is a popular topic for students that are high school students as well as parents. I'm sure we have some parents here on this session. And you know, a topic now is how to pay for college. And so we have some pre-prepared questions of ones that we've heard the most in this process. And then again, as we mentioned, you want to make sure that you submit your questions in the Q&A section. We will prioritize the questions that are more applicable to everybody. We do know that sometimes this type of topic, you might have your specific questions regarding your family situation, and we will try our best to answer as many questions as possible. But at the same time, the goal of this session is really to introduce you to a lot of terminology and tips regarding this topic. So the first question that we would love to talk about is briefly explain the timeline for financial aid and when students should start thinking about paying for college. Dr. Curdy, if you want to take that one.
Okay, so that's a really loaded question right out of the gate. So, because there's two questions there. The first one is, when should I be thinking about paying for college? And that is really kind of a rubber meets the road kind of conversation. The answer is when the child is born. Basically, as far as paying for college is concerned, it is for many folks a lifetime achievement kind of thing. People who set up 529 plans, other educational investment vehicles, people are thinking about scholarships. People are trying to put their students in the right places for scholarships, like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and things of that nature. So paying for college is kind of a big, broad structure that's placed into it. In fact, with the Department of Education, as far as that, the law that is built into the system, right? The foundation of financial aid is the expectation that the family will help contribute to higher education, right? I mean, it's baked in. And so because it's part of the process, that expectation to how do you pay for it is already kind of part of it as far as the life cycle of the student going through their educational system. Now that's the kind of existential big kind of answer. As far as like real practical timelines are concerned, and feel free to step on me because I will talk, is that if right now your student is a freshman or a sophomore in high school, then this point we're kind of thinking about getting good grades, participating in the right sort of things, being kind of part of a community, maybe finding where they're a leader and things of that nature. It's their junior year that things start to get kind of interesting for scholarships. And I always love talking to high school students when they're juniors, because this is where scholarships become sort of interesting. This is where a student starts to flesh out who they are as far as scholarships are concerned, right? Start thinking about those essays, letters of recommendation, things like that. Honestly, in the junior year, in the springtime, as they start to close that junior year out, a student probably needs to have the 5 or 7 stock essays for scholarships kind of lined up, vetted, read, people who know what they're doing. and asking for letters of recommendation, because you're going to have those teachers and counselors and whomever all summer long are going to write those letters, right? You need to give them plenty of breathing room because they're already overworked and underpaid, right? So that's sort of the life cycle of that junior. He kind of starts to build out those scholarship essays. And by the way, that's the thing that keeps students from doing scholarships is the essays. As folks will be like, oh my God, I got to write essays for every single thing. Look, there are 7 essays in the entire world. That's it. And there's only about 5 you need for scholarships. So at the end of the day, you figure out what those essays are by doing scholarship applications. So that makes sense. Like you start to see the trend, right? Describe something that is going to impact your generation in 30 years. That is a stock standard issue. You kind of almost expect to see that one every 3rd or 5th essay, right? So you build that out so it works for you for everything, right? Obviously, you're going to write green energy, right? And obviously, you're also going to write petroleum in the next line down because that you don't care, right? Who's going to give you your money, right? So this is how this works. So the essays get built over here. Summer, you breathe. And then, bam, end of summer, things start to get hot and heavy come August. Applications open for universities. Applications for the FAFSA opens up in October 1st, right? Scholarship applications, bing, 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 start to pinking all over the place because they've gone live, and chaos. It's lovely. It's wonderful. It's so much fun because you guys get to do so much cool stuff right now. You're able to start choosing universities and colleges. You're starting to make choices about where you're going to go, how you're going to get there, housing, all sorts of fun stuff, but you're also working on your financial aid, which is kind of this conversation. So that starts October, and October 1st is when it opens. First come, first serve ain't exactly right, but it sure isn't a bad model to follow. In fact, we do a big Halloween campaign here on our campus. I've got zombie hands and all sorts of stuff to kind of get the word out that we want to get that FAFSA done now, because earlier is better for those students with really high financial need, which is, most of us, right? And so we go ahead and get that done. Priority deadline for the state of Texas is January the 15th, but really our best students are getting that done well in advance. Pay attention to scholarships at this point too. I don't know. I'm sure Southern Methodist has a sort of deadlines for their scholarships. Texas State, December 15th. So I'm telling folks to get their scholarships done for universities by Thanksgiving. Guess what? I like food, right? Halloween for the FAFSA, Thanksgiving for your scholarships, Rockstar, we're in place, right? Everything is ready to go. And now all you have to do is worry about housing. And so, you're admitted, you're funded. Now you just need a place to sleep when you go to college. Does that all kind of jive? Does that sort of make it that sense? What I overlook there? I've not completed the life cycle. We're not talking about documentation or anything like that, but that gets us to financial aid.
I love the analogy of the Halloween, the holidays. That's wonderful. I loved it. Anything to add in terms of just from the private sector regarding that timeline of anything Dr. Kerr mentioned that might be applicable towards the private side of it?
Well, like he said, the earlier the better, of course, especially when completion of the FAFSA. And here at SMU, we do ask, we say we're required, but it's really optional, the CSS profile. Because as soon as you can get those 2 completed and submitted, then when it's time for us to start awarding, then we know you guys will be in that first batch to receive your financial aid awards.
Hey, Penny, at our school, we don't require a CSS. What is that exactly?
Oh, I'm sorry. The CSS profile is done through the College Board, and it helps us determine a student's eligibility for institutional need-based aid.
So at a 4-year institution, the FAFSA is kind of the one-stop shop. So the FAFSA sort of generates any of the institutional grants automatically within the structure. So we don't have part, which makes sense, right? Public, private, we're very different schools.
Exactly. Like we tell our students and parents, FAFSA determines federal and state eligibility. CSS profile helps us determine institutional, SMU's as institutional need-based aid. So those are the 2 things.
So let's talk, there's a lot of verbiage in the financial aid aspect that sometimes people use interchangeably. And so Penny, I was hoping maybe to kind of help the families that are on the Zoom here today. Can we talk the differences about financial aid and scholarship? Because sometimes a lot of families will come to us as professionals and say, I'm interested in financial aid. Can you kind of help maybe talk a little bit about the differences between those terminologies so that way they can make sure that when they ask our offices that they're getting the right information?
Right. Financial aid, now that's where I am in financial aid, which helps determine, again, your FAFSA, which determines the federal aid, federal and state aid, and the CSS profile, which determines the student's eligibility for institutional need-based aid. Now, as far as scholarships, those are used all academic-based scholarships. So those are not awarded from financial aid. That's when you would talk to admissions regarding like merit-based scholarships. But other than that, if you have any questions about grants, loans, or what have you, you come to the financial aid office. Scholarships, merit-based scholarships, that's Abby's department.
And Dr. Kerr, how does that work at state schools?
Sure. I worked in scholarships for many years, and so I've got some experience in how that sort of plays out. At Texas State University, just as an example, we have we recognize some national recognitions for scholarships, like the National Merit Award, right? National Hispanic Scholarship, things of that nature are recognized by our school. Not necessarily all schools will do this, but some do. Then we have what we call assured scholarships. The air quotes is because you remember that what it means, because it's assured to you based on admissions data. So as people, as your information intakes through admissions, your test scores, your class ranking, whether you're 6 foot tall or not, I don't know what all is on it. And so it all comes through and it hits those assured markers, right? So if certain test scores, certain class ranking, you're assured a scholarship. You just get one automatically. It's part of the packaging. I love them because the computer does all the work for me at this point. Then there's competitive scholarships at institutions. I'm sure y'all have these as well. The competitive ones are where we take promising students and we kind of put them in the same scholarship pool. At Texas State, we have a separate application to let us know you're interested in pursuing those. And that for us is the Bobcat online scholarship system. But that sort of tells us you're eligible for them, you can start it up. And then on our side of the house, what it does is it does kind of look at what your major is going to be now. It kind of takes a look to see where you're from, all sorts of other elements, right? Which high school, because sometimes benefactors from a high school only want to give, for those students. And that sort of thing starts to kick into the system. And then you're in a competitive scholarship pool. Our institution allows you to pick all 3 of those. You can be National Merit Scholar and pick up a President's Honor Scholar because your test scores and ranking are so high, and pick up a competitive scholarship. Other universities don't have that sort of breakdown. There's like you're this or this or this. But keep that in mind. And that right there is just institutional. That's what the university is offering to you. I can tell you from experience that my very best scholarship students get most of their money from the outside world. You are competing when you go into a school, you're competing against other really bright folks, right? And so it's one of those, whether you get one or not, sometimes is on the fence. We don't know if you are. Whereas outside scholarships, my experience to that has been volume. People who work hard and push out a lot of scholarship applications have a tendency to receive more scholarships money. So that's the other side of that coin. So the FAFSA application, getting that sorted out and lined up early is important, but you don't have a lot of agency over that process. It's the algorithm inside the FAFSA that will determine your Pell Grant eligibility. It is the availability of funding to the university, whether or not we will have institutional grants to offer to you or state grants to offer to you. That's all based on income and taxes, number in college, people in the household, all those questions that go onto a FAFSA kick out part of that algorithm. And so that tells us what we can offer you in aid, but scholarships, you do have agency over. And that's why I love talking to juniors about this, because right now you could get in front of this and make so much money. And when I'm talking about so much money, y'all, I'm talking my very best student, scholarship student, her first year in college had one very small university scholarship. Right? Tiny, little thing. It was nice. The rest of it, all $20,000 of it was outside scholarships, nickel and diming it, $750 here, $250 there, $1,500 there. Her senior year, she made over $30,000 in outside scholarships. 30,000. And all she did was hustle, guys. That's all she did. She just pumped up the volume. She just took it, started, because it's all online now, right? Cut, copy, paste, cut, copy, paste, cut, copy, paste. Write the right essays, put the right space in them, and then find the right database to use that you really love. Treat it like a jazz instrument and go to work on that, y'all. Just do it. Seriously, I'm running into other people in the wild here around me in the university who are following some of these steps, you know, this idea of just volume, volume, volume. They've heard me talk about this endlessly, and they're doing it and they're getting success. So I really recommend thinking hard about scholarships in a way that maybe you haven't before. Not about drafting how many essays, but drafting careful essays, 5 or 6 good ones, and then just killing it. Just treat it like a machine. Just boom, 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 and out the door you go. Sorry, that I'm going.
No,
on.
this is what we hope was more of a conversation opposed to, you know, for the people listening, a lot of schools will do specific financial aid nights and they'll get into the real detailed, you know, formulas and things like that. Our goal today was more to introduce you to these concepts. Hopefully you hear some practical takeaways because it is a shorter session too. And so, no, this is exactly what I was hoping to accomplish as the moderator here today. One terminology you all have been using, what is the difference between grants and loans? I'm not sure, Penny, but Dr. Kerr, whoever wants to take that, just to kind of briefly break down that misnomer that's sometimes out there for families just learning about the financial aid process.
All right. Well, like we say in financial aid, grants, free money. This money that you do not have to pay back. Loans, totally different. You have to pay back a loan, whether it's a federal student loan, a Parents Plus loan, private loan, or what have you. Those are, you have to repayable. Again, whereas grants are not.
Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of it, right? I mean, you're trying to get the free stuff, right? The money you don't have to repay. And loans, on the other hand, you do. So financial aid loan packages can, depending on the school, be very high, right? With a Parent Plus loan perhaps being thrown into the mix. That can really make it really elevate, and you have to pay them back. And this is, well, that's a totally different conversation. We can talk about how to manage money once you're here. So if you have questions about your loans, talk to a financial aid somebody, because we'll be happy to break that up. Just so you know, there's 2 types of loans for students, subsidized and unsubsidized, at least from the federal family. And so the way I try to remember that is if it's sweet, savory, satisfactory, it's super, it's everything nice that starts with the letter S is subsidized, because what it is it's interest free. That's the subsidy. The government is waiving those interest rates while the student is in school. The unsubsidized student loan will be offered to anybody. I'd give it to Bill Gates's kids, but it would also be accruing interest while the student's in school. And so between the two, you would always, if offered them, you would always choose your subsidized first over your unsubsidized.
Exactly. Great. Yeah, we always hear that question. What's the big difference? That's a great tip on how to remember the two. Penny, you had another tip here?
I was going to say, just keep in mind with the federal loans that Dr. Kerr just went over, they do not go into repayment until 6 months after the student graduates. So it's not like you have to start paying them back while you're in school. Some parents, students choose that they want to go ahead, like with the unsubsidized, they want to at least start making the payments on the interest to keep it from accruing, which they can do that. You would just talk to your loan servicer and they'll get that all set up for you. But if not, then you can just let, like I said, then they won't kick into repayment until 6 months.
Yeah, and there's a lot of advantages to those loan programs. I mean, the interest rates are very, very low, general rule. As pointed out, you don't begin repayment on a student loan until 6 months after you graduate or drop below half time. Right. And those interest rates are fixed. So at the time that they're dispersed, so if we say an interest rate is, what are they now, 3.73 or something like that?
Exactly. Yes.
Then it's fixed at that disbursement. So it's not going to go up. So if next year it goes up to 4%, that loan is fixed at 3.73. Does that make sense? So there's a lot of advantages to the federal loans. And I only mention that because I do run into families, I'm sure we all do, right? Where they're taking out alternative loans, loans that are not through the federal government.
Right.
private entities like credit unions, banks, and others. And just putting that on the forefront there, because those oftentimes are either not fixed or the interest rates tend to be higher. There's credit checks, there's applications, there's sometimes there's delays, there's a 2-week waiting period built into the process. So just don't think that you have to turn to that first. First, do the FAFSA, see what financial aid can offer to you, and then talk to a financial aid office about the next options if you need to. Don't do that in a vacuum. We're free. You're welcome to reach out to any financial aid office in the country, and we will be happy to wax poetically about the benefits and disadvantages of private loans.
And there's a question just for verification from one of the parents. Subsidized interest-free while in college, correct? And
Correct.
Will every family qualify for it regardless?
Subsidized loans. Oh, I'm sorry, Patty.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Subsidized loans are need-based. So you would have to demonstrate financial need as calculated by the FAFSA.
Right.
So for example, it's entirely possible for a family not to demonstrate financial need based on the FAFSA, and so only be offered unsubsidized student loan as a result. Grants are also need-based aid, and so is some types of campus employment, college work study, and things like that are also need-based programs. So just be aware of that. What constitutes need is that calculation on the FAFSA. And it's really hard for financial aid officers probably aren't going to tell you what that is cold. I make X, do I get X? We really don't, because the algorithm is kind of big. How many people are going to college? How many people in the household? How much taxes you paid? Even the age of the parent goes into the calculation. So we don't like to eyeball it. We prefer to see the hard data on the FAFSA.
Exactly.
Another question, some of the questions are already coming in, and we kind of already touched base about the FAFSA. A majority of people at least understand free application for federal student aid, emphasis on the free. Some private institutions require the CSS profile, such as SMU. I think there's like 5 or 6 here in the state of Texas. Penny, is that correct?
Yes, very few.
There's very few. But then there's one more here in the great state of Texas, the TASFA. Can someone talk a little bit more in detail about that? When is it necessary to use this document?
So the TASFA application really should only be done if you are unable or ineligible, I should say, to fill out a FAFSA. So the free application for federal student aid, you must meet certain eligibility criteria to meet that. The one that probably stands out most in this conversation is citizenship or eligible non-citizen.
Right.
And so if you are not a citizen or an eligible non-citizen as defined through the FAFSA, I won't go into those criteria, but you may find yourself in a position where you're just not eligible for financial aid through the FAFSA. But because Texas shares a long and noble history with our neighbors to the south, they are generous, and no other state does this, where they offer the state aid to students that are residents of the state of Texas, graduating from Texas high schools, I think is part of the criteria.
Right, exactly, it is.
And then, and then they fill out a paper application, one day online, but I'll believe it when I see it, but a paper application gets filled out. This paper application then is the questions that are on the FAFSA. In fact, on our end, we data enter it as if we got a paper FAFSA cold, right? Never do a paper FAFSA, by the way. But if we get a TASFA, we will enter it. We will run it through the calculation, and it will generate the index number that we use to determine financial aid, and we will offer that student state aid only. We can't offer federal, ineligible for that. However, if they're eligible to fill out a TASFA, recommend doing that. That's super critical to get that done very, very early. And my pro tip on filling that out is go through it 3 times. There's a gazillion little check boxes on it. Somebody's going to forget something, and we will incomplete the file, and then we're hung up. Now you have to do it again. And signatures back and forth, and it just kind of gets. So just go through it. My personal preference, I take those neon yellow highlighters, the ones I'm talking about. Hang on, I keep them on right here on my desk. That color right there. And you go through it and you check every question off to make sure you've done it. So there's the reason why it must be this highlighter color. It must be this. It does not show up on scanned documents. This is invisible ink to a scanner. So when Southern Methodist picks this up, they're going to scan it into their electronic system, right? And then it's going to, this is invisible. So I really recommend doing that. But that's what I do to every document. They think I'm insane. I've got this family sitting across from me and I'm just scribbling across their task bill and I'm like, but no, I'm really looking at every single question to make sure that nothing's missed. But that's the short and long of the task. It does open up the door though for things like, and I don't know if private schools offer this though, the Texas grant, and at our institution, Texas Public Education Matching Grant that goes with that Texas grant, and institution late as well.
And we have the tuition equalization grant.
Okay, that's what you guys have, yeah. And so, and another thing too to remember, those students that are not eligible to fill out a FAFSA, you are eligible to do scholarships. So that's, again, there's no reason for you to stop that process just because you don't meet a criteria over here. You can still keep pursuing scholarships down the road. In fact, I would really encourage that.
I agree.
We're gonna morph two questions into one so that we can give some additional time in case there are questions out there, but I probably will add one to our list here. But what are some resources or tips for families and students regarding paying for college? We've hit a couple of them, but like, what are some things that, if you were going through the college admissions process and the financial aid process now here in 2021, what are some tips or resources that these families either should bookmark or the highlighter is wonderful. That's a great tip too. What other tips would you give these families that are on this Zoom?
Really, like I say, the earlier the better. It opens up October 1st because you're using your previous 2 years tax returns. So it's not like you have to wait and file your taxes like you used to do back in the old days. And so I would just say the earlier the better. That way you have time. Once you receive your financial aid awards, you have time to determine if you're able to deal with that, or if you need to make some other kind of arrangements or whatever. And like Dr. Kerr said, starting for scholarships, because it won't hurt no matter what. Even if you get the best financial aid package in the world, those scholarships will still come in to be very handy.
As far as like practical tips, web pages and things like that, I would encourage everybody to, when you're thinking about a school or a university, is check out their financial aid web pages. Our web pages here are very long, they're comprehensive, we have a lot of information. I will admit ours are written a little stodgy, but that's okay, we're fixing that. But as far as, but find, and if you have questions, reach out to financial aid offices, because we are not going to turn you away because you're not a student with us. If you have a question about your FAFSA, we're going to answer your question about your FAFSA. Now, some tips. I'm sorry, I can go on forever, Abby, so stop me but tips of the FAFSA: answer the question exactly as it is asked. The number one, if I want to see a file get into a downward spiral that's nearly impossible to correct, is somebody anticipating something on a FAFSA. If you are married, it's married as of that day. If you are divorced or separated, you are divorced or separated as of this day. And that does not mean you are divorced or separated in your heart. You have to be in separate houses. Okay, we run into this, right? I've seen you know this, Penny, right? We see this in all flavors and shapes.
Right.
Answer the question as it is asked. When it gets to asking for things like investment information or asset information, I guess I should say, it is not looking at your retirement accounts. So don't put that down. I see that common. It is not asking about your housing. The home that you live in, your home is not an investment. If you have investment property, that's a different creature. Right. And then what's the other little pro tip? Oh, if you have a 529 investment for the student, that goes in the parent's name, not the student's. It helps protect it. So do that. Let's see here. Otherwise, though, I'd say see what's being offered at the individual schools. I think is probably where you need to land on that. We at Texas State have a lot of, like, I have access to financial coaches, for instance, which I know that is not offered to everybody, which is nice, right? So, but you kind of have to be in our pipeline for that to work. But otherwise, I'm trying to think of something that's a good solid pro tip to take away.
I know.
As far as
basically just do some research, just do your research as much as you can. Go to the school, the websites. Dr. Kersey, and
IRS data retrieval tool on the FAFSA. If it'll
right,
let
definitely. Sorry, yeah.
just import that automatically. And yeah, that's kind of where we are with it right now. Right now, there's still some things with the Department of Education. We're kind of waiting to hear back on certain things that I would otherwise normally be like, oh, let's do this, just because I just don't quite yet know. But we have that information. We'll kind of try to roll that out to folks as they need to. What else? Oh, timelines for individual schools will vary, by the way. You may get a notification from, I'll give you an example. Our school, we intend to have letters rolling out to first-time students at Texas State University towards the middle of December for award letters and things like that, right? There are some schools that are already doing that. So you may get something where you're getting an award letter from schools that are already doing that. I have no idea how they managed to do that because they, there's some processing sides that I don't think is quite yet done, but whatever. So they get it done. Other schools may take longer than that. Some may take all the way into the spring. Okay, so don't judge a school, right? If you're waiting for packaging and things like what we call packaging, by the way, that's the award offer that we offer to students. Just be aware that they're going to be kind of coming to you at different times if you, and I assume that you are, because you're smart, you're applying to multiple schools, right? You're applying to Southern Methodist because they're awesome. You're going to be applying to Texas State University because we are clearly the winner in that contest. And it's just one of those things where and you're going to choose lesser colleges, right? You're going to choose Yale and Harvard and places like that. You're going to get it out there and you're going to try to see, and as you do that, just recognize you're going to get information coming at you at different times. So just that's something just to think about.
So we have a question here that I was actually going to, because Penny, you had mentioned it was tax information from 2 years ago, which we're starting to become then into the timeline of COVID-19, and the questions being asked is specifically a small business owner. What happens? What should these families be doing or preparing if it is a significant difference between 2 years ago and now? Is there any pro text there of anything they should prepare for in regards to any unique circumstances, medical issues, things like that?
Right. Well, for one thing, when you do complete your FAFSA, no matter what, for the academic year 22-23, you have to use your 2020 tax returns. Now, what happened? Well, how we process everything here, once we receive your FAFSA and the CSS profile, if you choose to complete it, and the students awarded based off the information provided from the FAFSA and profile, the student received their financial aid awards. Okay, and then you look like, wow, that's it. But I had, but now we don't make that kind of money. There is an appeal process that you would contact your financial aid advisor, and we would talk to you about submitting it's called a professional judgment for special circumstance, such as, okay, Penny, my 2020 taxes showed I made this much, but now I'm making a whole lot less. And we'll take you and talk you through the process and, submitting what needs to be submitted. And so the package could possibly be reevaluated. So yeah, it's just what we call a special, like I said, it's called a professional judgment for special circumstances such as that.
Dr. Kerr, how does the state system look at it when is it similar or?
Very similar. I was just best say, Penny just sort of nailed it, and we'll move on to the next question. Yeah,
that worked. I got more over here.
Special circumstance. There's a form. Please speak to the office with us first because we'll help evaluate. Because it is an awful lot of new paperwork you're going to have to submit.
Exactly.
And that can sometimes be challenging for
challenging. Folks. Yeah, exactly.
One mom or parent, how soon can we complete the FAFSA again?
Do it right now.
Now.
Yep, pull the trigger. Now, when you do that, there's 2 years open right now. There's still 21, 22 floating around out there. Don't do that one. You're doing 22, 23.
Right.
Exactly. For the fall. If you're a junior, hang back. You ain't got to worry about it yet.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. And I will reinforce the first tip that Dr. Kerr gave about the essays. Use the essays that you used in the admissions process too. Recycle them. They don't talk to us. And so be smart about it. I mean, I think that's the one I always like to, when I'm having, because I'm the liaison to the financial aid office here, that's always my pro tip in that sense as well. And just as a reminder, as we're wrapping up, we have about 10 minutes left of the session. Again, please make sure you submit those questions in the Q&A, so that way we can make sure we can get these professionals here to answer these types of questions, because the one question I always get while they are still submitting them is, how does the non-custodial, I do presentations a lot. Does anyone, do Penny or Dr. Kerr, do you want to talk a little bit about the non-custodial? That seems to be a very popular question I always get asked.
Okay, so kind of a neat thing. And I think private guys, I think you guys have a different way of handling this. So from a federal financial aid perspective, there's the custodial parent, and then there's your non-custodial parent if parents are divorced, right? Obviously, if biological parents are together, then they're together and we put everybody on the FAFSA. So you take the custodial parent and that new household, if they've remarried, and new kids in that mix, any other people, dependents in that mix, and that's the person. Non-custodial, for the purposes of financial aid, I don't notice them. I don't see them at all.
Right. Exactly.
Now, they could still be contributing, they could still be helping pay, and they can do whatever they're doing over here, but I don't care. They're invisible to me. They're kind of like, federal veterans benefits. Just they happen. I don't know they're happening. So that works out. I do know that some private schools do look at that. So Penny, is that something that you'd like to weigh in on?
Right. Well, as Dr. Kerr said, with the FAFSA, like he said, that the non-custodial is invisible. Their information is nowhere, does not need to be on the FAFSA anywhere. Now, when it comes to the CSS profile, that's when it comes into play that once the parent, custodial, when the student and parent, custodial parent complete the CSS profile and they indicate the marital status as divorced, it's going to generate what they call a non-custodial statement to be sent to the non-custodial parent. So, and what happens is, I know we get a lot of calls and emails saying, I don't have contact with my non-custodial, or that he doesn't help or she doesn't help, pay for my college or whatever. Then you contact your financial aid advisor, and then we'll talk over some things. And then there's a possibility, there's a waiver that can be sent to you to complete, where that can be waived, where you don't have to submit that information. But it's, like I said, a different circumstance for everybody, different situation for everybody. So you would just contact the financial aid advisor, and we would go from there to talk about that non-custodial statement, a waiver, or what have you, as far as other profile.
Absolutely. I get that question more often, Dr. Kerr. So I figured, why not use this opportunity to help parents know about that. And then another question, it's more just, I think we had some people maybe join a little bit later, but what should they really be doing their freshman year in high school in regards to this topic? Obviously, it's too early to do the forms, but if you can kind of talk maybe through the freshman and sophomore aspects, since it seems we have more parents that are probably doing long-term planning, which is wonderful. You are our favorites because you already are thinking about this.
Right.
Okay. Can I just give a simple answer? The student needs to be awesome right now. All they do for the freshman and sophomore years, they need to be building themselves, right? They need to be taking the classes that they are energized to take if possible. I know there's these core curriculum, they kind of get stuck in them, but they need to be doing things maybe outside of school that's really interesting to them, that they love to do. Because when it comes time for scholarships and says, hey, I need to write something to deal with about a scholarship, we want to hear the passion in that essay. I'm not looking for something stock. I'm looking for something where you really care about it. So if you're interested in rearing aquatic hamsters, awesome. I'm interested in your aquatic hamster farm. And so we're going to get in there and kind of, let's build that passion for that. Now the environment's important for aquatic hamsters. I'm making stuff up and being silly. I know that. But really those freshmen at their very early time, be great. Just keep doing things. Look for leadership opportunities. Look for volunteer opportunities. Look for being generous. Look for places where you can learn outside of even the scholastic opportunities that the high school offers. These things help make a great scholarship contender in the future. As far as long-term financial planning, parents, you need to be thinking about the cost of education. It costs money. And so you need to be thinking about how you're going to finance that, how you're going to squirrel that away. 529s back when 10 years ago was the way to have started that, but next best day to start planning is today, right? So if you haven't got those investment vehicles lined up and ready to go, it's time to start seeing what other options and opportunities you have. Where can you maybe pull back a little bit in a lifestyle choice that will help you pay for college in the future? Maybe a conversation you need to be having as a family as you start to think about the college costs in the future. Know that they continue to go up, and it's not, unless something radically changes, I expect that trend to continue. So just be aware of that as you're planning this out. But that's kind of my thoughts on the matter.
One follow-up question about the specifically the 529 plans. How does this affect their ability to get a grant, packaging? How does that come into play as for those families that did establish that 529 plan?
I mean, your 529 plan is an investment vehicle for education, right? It's a little IRA. And so it's wonderful. It's a great thing you've done. Fantastic. It will go as the parents' assets, right? So when it comes time to ask for assets, it'll go there. There are, I can imagine cases where that would not happen, but we won't go into that scenarios right now. But let's just say that a 529 plan exists, goes for the parent's name. If the parent's the one who started it, by the way, a grandparent can set up a 529 on their own. I'm just going to point that out. And so, it's over here floating around where I can't see it anymore, right? Like here in the camera. And so, so that sort of thing comes into play. Does it impact the ability to get grants? The answer is, it depends. Like all financial aid answers are, it depends. Depends on whether or not what the family's income is at this point, number of people in the household, and things like that. It is entirely possible for an income to be small enough on the FAFSA that it bypasses asset information altogether. And when that happens, we don't ask for it. It's not collected. So if one does exist, because back in the day, things were better off, and now things are maybe changed because of COVID, because of the economy of the modern era has shifted on you, then fine. It'll correct itself out on the FAFSA anyway, and everything will be okay. If you got a big old 529 plan and it's impacting your grants, congratulations, you got a big old 529 plan. You don't have to sweat the details now. You pay for college, which is kind of the point.
Right. Exactly.
So thanks for doing that. Thanks for being proactive. I know I was with my kid, right? And so 529 plan paid for everything, which was terrific because only unsubsidized student loans would have been offered. So
the questions are coming in. And so there's a question regarding, is it only the custodian's parents' assets that matter? And then more clarification about, they said, do not include retirement accounts, primary properties. What else? Sorry, the person missed that portion. I think you had rattled off some tips and things like that, Dr. Kerr.
Right. So as far as the non-custodial parent for public 4 years, public in community colleges and things like that, we don't care. They can have whatever assets they want. It sounds to me like for private institutions, some of them require a CSS form that does collect non-custodial parent information. So let's depend there. Insofar as, what you don't put in retirement, don't put your own home that you're in, you do not put your own farm that you're farming, right? It's only investment properties and things of that nature. Obviously, stocks, bonds, cash savings, things of that nature go into your assets. And if you have a business, in the rare case that you happen to have a business that has more than 100 employees, then we also gather the business assets. More than 100 employees, though, that pulls out 99% of the small business owners, right? You stop being a small business owner when you have 100 folks on your staff. So that's kind of the breakdown on that. If you have a bunch of stuff floating around like that, such as, I won't go into details on UTMAs and things of that nature, please read what it says on the FAFSA regarding those investment vehicles. It's important how you do that. If you happen to be in a position where you have a trust, even if that trust does not mature and actualizes while the student is in college, it still is an asset that has to be reported under the student side of the house during that, even though the trust has not yet gone into effect. Right, so be aware of that.
Great. Perfect. Well, we are 1 minute left, so I want to make sure that we say thank you to our panelists. Wonderful job. We hope that you all enjoyed this topic. We know it's a very hot topic in the admissions and financial aid world and parent world as well. So any last words as we round out the session at 5:15, because we do know that the college fair component does kick off here soon. So anything, Dr. Kerr, Penny, to finish up the session?
No, just gather as much information as you can.
I feel like we've hit the high points, so thank you very much. For
Exactly. And if you have any doubts or questions you can't find on the website, you don't understand, just contact the school. Ask for the financial aid office or admissions, whoever you need to talk to with questions. We'll be more than happy to help you. assist you and make this a real smooth transition for you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Chelsea.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, I'm just going to wrap things up here for us quickly. All right, so as I am sharing. Oh, that. All right, here we go. Perfect. All right, so thank you to our presenters, our panelists. We really appreciate your time, and the participants for being with us this evening. When you close this window, there will be a link to a very quick survey. We appreciate any feedback you can provide. We encourage you to check back to the schedule and sign up for more sessions. And you will be able to find the sessions recording as well as all the other recordings at strivescan.com/Texas. Thanks so much and have a great night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.